I never imagined I'd find myself in this situation. I mean, sure, every couple has their ups and downs, but I thought Ashley and I were solid. We had been married for 5 years, and I always considered her my partner in crime, my best friend. We shared dreams, laughter, and even the occasional fight over who left the dishes in the sink. But lately, something felt off. The little things started to stack up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pushed away. At first, it was just the late nights. I'd come home from work and she'd be glued to her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. I'd joke about it, saying, "Hey, are you texting your new boyfriend?" She'd roll her eyes and laugh it off, but the laughter didn't feel genuine. Then there were the sudden changes in her routine. Once the social butterfly who would jump at the chance for a night out, she now preferred quiet evenings alone. I tried to convince myself it was just a phase. Maybe she was stressed out at work, or perhaps she needed some time to recharge. But the nagging doubts kept creeping in. One evening, while cleaning up the living room, I stumbled upon her phone. It was face up, and for some reason I couldn't help but glance at the screen. That's when I saw the messages. They were flirty and full of inside jokes that I didn't understand. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but everything in me screamed that something was wrong. I took a picture of the screen, my hands shaking as I did so. I knew I needed proof before confronting her. The next few days were a blur. I watched Ashley closely, searching for any signs that might confirm my worst fears. I noticed how she'd smile at her phone when it buzzed, how she'd become evasive when I asked about her day. The worst moment was when I saw her leave for a girls' night out with a new friend she had recently made. I didn't know this new friend, but the whole situation felt staged, like I was watching a poorly written drama unfold in front of me. I could barely eat or sleep as I waited for her to come home, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and heartbreak. When she finally walked through the door at 2 in the morning, I was ready. I confronted her about the messages I had found, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "Who is Mark?" I demanded, forcing the name out like it was poison. Her face went pale, and I could see the gears turning in her head as she struggled to come up with an excuse. "Oh, come on, it's nothing," she replied, a hint of annoyance in her voice. "He's just a business contact. You know how it is. We talk shop sometimes. You're being ridiculous." I couldn't believe her. I pressed her harder, laying out the details of the messages, the tone, the intimacy of it all. She finally broke down, but not in the way I expected. Instead of confessing, she turned the tables and accused me of being paranoid and insecure. "You're so jealous of my success that you can't handle me having friends," she screamed. That moment shattered something in me. The woman I loved was lying through her teeth. The anger bubbled up inside me, but I also felt an overwhelming sadness. I had loved this woman, and here she was, spinning a web of lies, desperately trying to protect herself instead of our marriage. I felt like I was losing a part of myself, and the anger morphed into a deep, aching sorrow. As the night wore on, I realized I couldn't just sit there and let her manipulate me. I needed to take back control of my life, to find a way to turn this around. But how? I didn't want to throw away what we built together, yet the thought of her betrayal rocked me to my core. The emotional impact of her lies felt heavy, suffocating almost. I needed clarity, and I needed a plan. So I started thinking about what I wanted. Revenge? No. I wanted to rise above this. I wanted to turn my pain into something powerful. I needed to focus on building myself and my future. Maybe this was an opportunity to not just recover but to thrive. I spent sleepless nights contemplating my next move. I may have lost trust in Ashley, but I wasn't going to lose myself. Looking back, I see that moment as the catalyst for a journey I never anticipated. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a man on a mission. I would take my hurt and build something greater. And soon, I would have the chance to make Ashley feel the weight of her choices. After that confrontation, I went into overdrive mode. I was fueled by a mixture of anger and determination. I knew I had to gather more evidence about Ashley's affair with Mark. I had taken that picture of her messages, but I wanted to dig deeper. I needed to be absolutely sure before I made my next move. I started by doing something I never thought I'd do. I began monitoring her actions. It felt invasive, but all I could think about was the betrayal and the way she had dismissed my feelings. I started following her when she left the house, keeping my distance, of course. I followed her to a cafe where she met up with this Mark guy. I parked a few blocks away and tried to keep my composure. I could barely breathe as I watched them laugh and lean in close to each other. My chest tightened as I witnessed the intimacy between them, genuine laughter, whispers shared, and the way they looked at each other. It was crushing. The woman I loved was not just having a fling, she was emotionally invested in this man. I recorded the entire encounter on my phone, capturing their smiles, the way she tossed her hair back when she laughed. I felt like a ghost, hidden away while my life played out in front of me. I wanted to scream, to confront them right then and there, but I held back. I had a plan and I needed to stay calm. The time for confrontation wasn't now. I had to be strategic. When I returned home, I felt empty. Each step toward the door was heavy as I replayed the scene in my mind. I tossed my keys on the table and stared at the wall, the reality of my situation crashing over me like a wave. I needed to think about my next steps carefully. The emotional toll was immense, but I learned quickly that I could channel my anger into something productive. I threw myself into my work, focusing on my career as a financial analyst. I had always had a knack for investing, but now I was determined to take it to the next level. I began researching and analyzing stocks with a newfound passion. I would spend hours each night, reading financial reports and market trends. The more I immersed myself in this world, the stronger I felt. I had a goal: to build a fortune that would not only secure my future but show Ashley the consequences of her betrayal. As the weeks passed, I became consumed by my mission. I started making strategic investments, some risky and others more stable. My portfolio began to grow, and with it, so did my confidence. I felt empowered, and each gain was a reminder that I was taking control of my life. I was no longer the passive husband she could manipulate. I was a man with a plan. But then, Ashley's behavior changed again. She started to act as though nothing had happened, and I could see the dissonance between us. She would ask about my day, seemingly trying to reconnect, but I couldn't shake the feeling of resentment. I realized she thought she could just sweep this under the rug. The contradictory emotions swirling in my mind, anger, hurt, and a twisted sense of satisfaction at my growing success, kept me on edge. One evening, I decided to push her a bit further. I casually mentioned a business trip I was planning. It was a lie, but the glimmer of shock and concern on her face was oddly satisfying. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice a mixture of confusion and concern. "You've been so focused on work lately." The irony wasn't lost on me. She had no idea that my focus was a direct response to her betrayal. "Just some opportunities I'm exploring," I said with a casual wave of my hand. The truth was, I was building something that would change everything. I wanted her to feel the consequences of her actions, not just emotionally, but in a way that would remind her of what she had given up. I continued to keep my distance, investing more of my time into my work and my plans. I learned to enjoy the quiet moments at home. It was almost therapeutic. I would cook, clean, and think about my future, all while mentally preparing for the day I would confront Ashley with everything I had. I had become someone different in the process. I was no longer just the guy who let things slide. I was a man determined to reclaim his life. Each day felt more empowering than the last. I was no longer defined by my relationship with Ashley. I was building my own identity. And with it, I would ensure that she understood the gravity of her actions. I wasn't just out for revenge. I was out for redemption for myself. I was ready for the next steps of my plan, but I also knew that I had to confront her when the time was right. I started thinking about how I would expose her to the truth of her betrayal. It was going to be a pivotal moment, and I wanted it to count. Little did she know that the best was yet to come. It was a rainy Friday evening when everything came to a head. I had spent the week focusing on my latest investment strategies, and the progress I had made was astounding. My portfolio was thriving, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement about my growing wealth. But my emotional turmoil had not subsided. If anything, it had become a constant companion. Ashley was coming home late that night, another girl's night out, or so she claimed. I knew better by now. It was a routine I had started to expect, and I used the time to prepare for the confrontation I had been dreading yet anticipating. I wanted to lay everything bare in front of her, no holds barred. I had collected evidence, built my case, and rehearsed my words in front of the bathroom mirror countless times. As I sat on the couch, flipping through the images of our life together on my phone, I felt a mix of nostalgia and anger. This was a woman I had shared my life with, and I couldn't fathom how things had unraveled so quickly. I kept reminding myself that I wasn't the one at fault here. This was her doing, her choices. I had to keep that in mind as I prepared. When she finally walked through the door, I could tell she had been drinking. Her makeup was smudged, and she had that carefree, almost reckless look in her eyes. "Hey, babe, I had such a fun night," she exclaimed, overcompensating in her enthusiasm. My stomach churned at the sight of her. I took a breath, steeling myself for what was about to happen. "Yeah, I saw the pictures on Instagram," I replied coolly, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Looks like you had a good time with Mark." The name slipped from my lips with a sharpness that surprised even me. Her face changed instantly, the laughter fading into a look of panic. What do you mean?" she stammered, feigning innocence. It was performative, and we both knew it. I stood up and walked slowly towards her, my heart racing but my resolve steady. "I mean, I saw you two together at that cafe a few weeks ago. I have it all on video," I said. The look of shock on her face was priceless, and I felt a rush of satisfaction. I held up my phone, ready to hit play and show her the evidence, but I paused. "Why did you have to lie to me, Ashley? Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" I asked, my voice low and steady, trying to maintain my composure despite the storm brewing inside me. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for a way to navigate this confrontation. "It's not what you think, Mark and I. We just talk about business, you're overreacting," she called out, trying to regain control. Her voice trembled, and I could see the crack in her facade. "Business?" I echoed, incredulity lacing my words. "When was the last time you talked to him about work? I've seen the way you look at him. It's not business, it's something else entirely." She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "I've been watching you, Ashley. Your lies are transparent, and I'm not going to let you manipulate me anymore. You've betrayed me, you've betrayed our marriage, and I won't stand for it." Her expression shifted from shock to anger. "You're being ridiculous. This is such a dramatic reaction. I can't believe you'd actually think I'd cheat on you. You're the one who's been distant and focused on work." I clenched my fists, the anger bubbling to the surface. "I focused on work because I felt you slipping away. It was obvious. I was trying to hold onto something I thought we had." For a moment, the room fell silent. The weight of our accusations hung in the air, and I could feel the tension crackling between us. I watched her carefully, waiting for her to crack, to drop the act and admit what she had done. But instead, she took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. "Okay, fine, I have been spending time with Mark, but it's just complicated. I don't know how to explain it," she finally admitted, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "Complicated, is that what you call it?" I shot back. "You think that's an excuse? You've made your choice, Ashley. I've given you every chance to be honest with me, and you've chosen to lie instead." I felt a strange sense of liberation wash over me. I had finally called her out, and she was cornered. I could see the realization cross her face, the panic in her eyes as the reality of the situation began to sink in. "I don't want this to end," she said, desperation creeping into her tone. "We can work through this. I can cut ties with him, just give me a chance." But in that moment, I realized that my heart had already begun to harden. I could feel the walls closing in around me, and I had to make a choice. "No, Ashley, you've already made your choices. You've shown me who you really are. I won't be a second choice in someone else's love story." The look on her face was one of disbelief and regret, but I was resolute. I had come too far, built too much, and changed too deeply to allow myself to be dragged back into the chaos of her choices. I turned away from her, my heart racing but my mind clear. I needed to prepare for what came next. I was done being her fallback plan. I would focus on my own success and stability, and I would ensure that she understood the full weight of her betrayal. The consequences of her actions were about to become very real. After that night, everything shifted. The atmosphere in the house felt suffocating. Although I had confronted Ashley, I knew that the real confrontation would come when my plans materialized. With our marriage hanging by a thread, I focused my energy on my investments and personal growth. It felt like I was shedding layers of the person I used to be, the passive husband who had overlooked the signs of betrayal, turning instead into a man who was ready to take charge and carve out a new identity. I threw myself into my work for the next few weeks. I was determined to increase my wealth exponentially. Each successful trade reinforced my resolve, and with every dollar I earned, I felt a sense of empowerment I hadn't experienced in years. I was building something that was entirely my own, something Ashley had never contributed to and never would. I started frequenting networking events, meeting other investors and rubbing shoulders with people who shared my ambition. But Ashley was still there, floating through the house like a ghost of our past. She tried to reach out to me, attempting to engage in conversations that felt forced and awkward. "How was your day?" she'd ask with a hopeful smile, but I remained nonchalant. I had learned to keep my distance emotionally, and it was liberating. One evening, I came home late from a networking event. I was buzzing with excitement over a potential investment opportunity. I walked into the living room, ready to share my news, but the sight before me stopped me in my tracks. Ashley was sitting on the couch and Mark, my wife's lover, was sitting beside her, laughing and sharing a bottle of wine. Time froze as my mind raced. I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with disbelief. They hadn't just crossed a line, they had stomped all over it. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm. I stepped back into the shadows of the hallway to observe, disbelief etched on my face. "You're so funny, Mark. I can't believe you said that." Ashley giggled, leaning a little too close to him. My gut twisted in knots. They were not just having an affair, they were building a life together while I was in the dark. I didn't want to react impulsively. I had been waiting for the right moment, and now it had arrived. I took a deep breath, swallowing the anger that threatened to rise, and made my way back into the living room. "Well, well, well, what do we have here?" I said, feigning casualness, though my heart raced with every word. Ashley's laughter cut off abruptly, and she turned to face me. "Oh, I didn't hear you come in." Her voice was too high, too defensive. Mark shot up from his seat, looking like a deer caught in headlights. I was just, checking in on Ashley," he stammered. "Checking in," I repeated, my voice low and controlled. "Seems more like you're checking out." I walked further into the room, my presence commanding as I crossed my arms over my chest. The tension in the air was palpable. "Ashley, is this how you've been spending your time while I've been working on building our future?" I turned to her, my voice steady but laced with disappointment. "It's not what it looks like," she exclaimed, but the panic in her eyes betrayed her. "Mark just dropped by to discuss a project." "A project?" I laughed bitterly. "Really? Because it looks to me like you've been enjoying your own little rendezvous." I pointed a finger toward Mark, who stood frozen, unsure whether to leave or defend himself. Ashley opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "Save it. I've seen enough. I had my doubts, but now I have all the proof I need. You've chosen him over me." I turned to Mark, my voice rising slightly. "You think this is a game? You're messing with my life here." Mark's bravado faltered, and he looked at Ashley for guidance. But she was staring at me, her expression shifting from shock to something I couldn't quite read. "Guilt, perhaps. Please, let's not do this here," she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. "We can talk about this." "No, there's nothing to discuss," I interjected. "You've made your choice clear. You've chosen to betray me, and now you're going to face the consequences." Ashley's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out as if to touch my arm. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I was confused. I thought you didn't care anymore." "Confused?" I scoffed, stepping back from her reach. "You didn't just get confused. You actively chose to go behind my back. This isn't about misunderstanding. This is about betrayal. I won't be a fool anymore." I turned to Mark again, who was still standing there, looking like a child caught in a lie. "And you," I said, pointing at him, "you'll never be welcome here again." Mark opened his mouth to protest, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned to Ashley, my heart aching but resolute. "You can keep your relationship with him, but it won't be with my blessing. I'm done with this charade. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine." The look of devastation on her face was a mix of betrayal and realization. Maybe she thought I would fight for her or beg her to stay, but I had moved past that. I was ready to reclaim my life, and that meant letting her go. As I walked out into the night, I felt a mix of victory and sorrow. I had exposed the truth, and now it was time to take the next step in my journey. I would rebuild my life without Ashley, and in the process, ensure that I thrived in ways she could never have imagined. The next phase of my plan was ready to unfold, and I was more determined than ever to show her exactly what she had lost. The days that followed that confrontation were both tumultuous and cathartic. I had made the decision to break free from Ashley's grasp, yet the reality of living without her still weighed heavily on my mind. I wasn't just grieving the loss of my marriage, I was also grappling with the loss of a life I had envisioned with her. But the more I reflected on the betrayal, the clearer my path became. I immersed myself in my work and my investments, channeling my energy into something productive. The anger I felt after that night transformed into a burning motivation. I had a renewed sense of purpose, and with each financial victory, I felt a little more liberated. I set ambitious goals for myself, aiming to double my investments in a matter of months. It was exhilarating to watch my portfolio grow while I simultaneously distanced myself from the emotional fallout of my marriage. At the same time, Ashley's attempts to reconcile continued to haunt me. She would send me messages asking to meet up, expressing her regret and desire to talk things through. I'd look at my phone, her texts blinking like a siren's call, but I'd remind myself of the choice I had made. I had no intention of falling back into the trap of her manipulations. I was building a new life, a life without the shadows of infidelity. I started socializing more, stepping out into the world with an air of confidence I hadn't felt in a long time. I met new people, other successful investors, entrepreneurs, and even a few potential love interests. They were all drawn to my newfound drive, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of empowerment in their presence. I was reinventing myself, and the more I interacted with others, the more I recognized the strength I had regained. Then one evening, I attended a high-profile networking event hosted by a wealthy investor whose reputation preceded him. His connections were unparalleled, and I knew this was an opportunity I couldn't miss. As I made my way through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, I noticed a woman across the room. She was gorgeous, with an effortless elegance that made heads turn. I felt a spark of attraction, but I didn't want to rush into anything. Instead, I kept my focus on making connections. As the night unfolded, I exchanged business cards and discussed potential investment opportunities with others. But every so often, I would glance back at her, and our eyes would meet. There was an undeniable chemistry that ignited between us. Yet I held back. I needed to ensure that I was ready to open my heart again. Later in the evening, as the crowd thinned out, I found myself standing next to her at the bar. "You've got quite the network here tonight," she remarked, her voice smooth and inviting. "Absolutely. It's a great opportunity," I replied, trying to keep my cool while my heart raced. "And you, what brings you out tonight?" "I'm an investor too," she said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I focus on tech startups. I love finding hidden gems that others overlook." We dove into conversation, discovering shared interests and ambitions. Her name was Lily, and the more we spoke, the easier it became to share my story. I found myself recounting my journey over the past few months, including my decision to leave Ashley and build something new. I could see the admiration in Lily's eyes, and it filled me with a sense of validation. "You're brave for taking that step," she said, her voice sincere. "It's not easy to walk away from someone you love, even when they've hurt you." "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," I admitted, "but I realized I deserve better. I'm focused on my future now." As the night came to a close, I felt a sense of hope blossoming within me. I exchanged numbers with Lily, and she promised to keep in touch. For the first time in a long while, I felt excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. However, when I returned home, my phone buzzed with a message from Ashley. "Can we talk? I really need to explain myself. I miss you." The words stung like a fresh wound, but I had grown stronger. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the promise I had made to myself. I was not going to allow Ashley back into my life. I had made my choice and I intended to stick with it. I typed back a simple response. I think it's best we don't. It felt liberating to send that message. As I settled in for the night, I reflected on how far I had come. I had faced betrayal, grief, and heartbreak, yet here I was not just surviving but thriving. I was building a new life, one that was full of potential and opportunity. I realized that this journey wasn't just about revenge. It was about rediscovering myself, reclaiming my power, and learning to love myself again. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready for whatever the future held. With each passing day, I felt stronger, a man reborn from the ashes of betrayal. I had taken control of my destiny, and I was determined to build a life that reflected the best version of myself. I was ready for the final chapter of this journey, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead. In the weeks that followed, I continued to build my newfound life with vigor. My investments flourished, and I found myself making connections that previously seemed unattainable. I was no longer just the average guy. I was becoming someone with a vision, and people started to take notice. Ashley, on the other hand, was still trying to reach out. I received countless messages from her, each one more desperate than the last. "I'm sorry," they would read. "I miss us." But I had made it clear that there was no going back. I wouldn't let her manipulation seep into my life. Again, I had learned the hard way that love without trust was a fragile illusion, and I refused to be a part of it. One evening, while preparing for a business presentation that I was particularly excited about, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Ashley. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity got the better of me. "Ashley," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Can we please talk?" she pleaded, her voice shaky. "I've done a lot of thinking since everything happened." I realized now how much I took for granted. Her words struck a chord, but I quickly reminded myself of the reasons I had walked away. "Ashley, I don't think there's anything left to discuss. You made your choices." "I know," she interrupted, desperation creeping into her tone, "but I'm trying to change. I've been seeing a therapist. I miss you." I took a deep breath, calming the storm of emotions that threatened to rise. "It's not that simple," I replied. "You've hurt me in ways I can't just forget. I've rebuilt my life since we've separated, and I'm focused on my future now." There was silence on the other end, and I imagined her processing my words. I could almost picture the tears rolling down her cheeks. "I thought we had something special," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You did have something special," I corrected, the conviction in my voice steady. "But you chose to destroy it. I won't allow that to happen again." As I hung up the phone, a sense of closure washed over me. I had faced the past, acknowledged the pain, and now I was ready to fully embrace my future. I had learned a lot about myself through the ordeal, and I was proud of the man I had become. A few days later, I attended that business presentation I had been preparing for. The room was filled with eager investors, and as I spoke about my latest strategy, I felt a surge of confidence. This was my moment to shine, and the energy in the room was electric. I could see their eyes lighting up with interest, and it fueled my determination even further. After the presentation, I was approached by several investors who were intrigued by my ideas. Among them was Lily, the captivating woman I had met weeks earlier. She had come to support me, and as we chatted, I could feel the chemistry between us growing. There was something refreshing about her. She listened, engaged, and shared her insights candidly. As the night progressed, I realized I was ready to explore this new connection. I had spent enough time being weighed down by the past, and now it was time to move forward. We exchanged ideas, laughter, and plans for future collaborations, and it felt exhilarating. When Lily leaned in closer, her eyes sparkling, I felt a thrill of excitement coursing through me. "I'd love to discuss this further," she suggested, her voice warm and inviting. "What do you say we grab dinner next week?" "Absolutely," I replied, a genuine smile spreading across my face. It was refreshing, this feeling of hope and possibility. As we wrapped up the evening, I took a moment to reflect on how far I had come. I had faced betrayal, anger, and heartbreak, but I had turned those experiences into fuel for growth and transformation. I was not merely seeking revenge. I had found a way to rise above it. I had reclaimed my power, and I was ready to embrace the life that awaited me. In the weeks that followed, I dove deeper into my work, my relationship with Lily blossoming slowly yet steadily. I found joy in the little things, sharing ideas, exploring new ventures, and simply enjoying each other's company. It was refreshing to connect with someone who saw me for who I was, not just as a reflection of their own insecurities. As I laid in bed one night reflecting on my journey, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I had learned that sometimes the most painful experiences lead to the most significant growth. I had discovered my worth and learned to love myself again. I had built a life filled with ambition, friendships, and potential, free from the shadows of my past. I felt ready to embrace whatever came next, confident in my ability to rise to the occasion. The journey was far from over, but I was ready to face it head-on with courage and determination. And in that moment, I knew that I would never again allow anyone to define my happiness or my future. I was the architect of my destiny, and the best was yet to come.